Good morning and welcome to our second installment of Throwback Thursday. And it's only our second one, and we already have a special guest. I'm going to let him tell you a little bit more about himself, but this is a gentleman that I have known since I was in sixth grade, I believe.
Yikes.
So this could be dangerous for me with the knowledge he has, but this is Dennis Foreman. Again, someone I've known for many years. And why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit to our church family?
Yeah, I've known Pastor Brad, feels like forever. I didn't realize it was sixth grade.
I think it was sixth grade.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, I was Brad's youth pastor for a while, and I am currently a teacher. Mm-hmm. I teach visual and theater arts. I'm also an ordained minister, and I am currently working with a church plant.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, I know this is dangerous, and you must promise to keep it short, but since you've known me so long, any funny, maybe slightly embarrassing stories that maybe our church family would enjoy from your perspective?
For me, the thing that really stands out when I think about you, Brad, is your involvement with the theater program in high school. And funny or not, I do like remembering that you played a lecherous wolf in the musical Into the Woods. Major actor here. I enjoyed working with Brad with that. I'm trying to think. You performed in some of our church pieces as well.
I did, yes.
You did. Any that stood out?
I know the first one I did was I think it's the worst Christmas pageant ever.
Okay.
And I tried out for the smallest speaking part available. It was 6 lines, I think. It was just one of the kids' throwaway. It was super small, and
How'd that work for you?
Well, you cast me in the lead. And I was terrified. And then we did our opening night, and when it was my turn, I was supposed to sing something off stage, and I'm not a singer. And I went to sing, and my voice cracked, and I was petrified. I just stopped, and the crowd erupted. They thought it was part of what was going on, and I was like, oh, I can do this.
And the rest is history.
So
He can't sing, so he does a Stephen Sondheim musical. Yeah, he can sing. Don't buy into this.
okay, we'll move past that because we don't want to offend the ears of anyone here when you try to get me to actually do it. So now, why I asked you to be here is we've been walking through this series called Seeing Red, and it's the idea of the things that get us angry, and honestly, looking at some of the things, maybe even specifically as Christians, we get angry about. And when we get angry and we start seeing red, we might start walking away from the Jesus way of how to do it. And since we're Jesus followers, we want to do it his way. We wanted to focus on some stuff. And one of those this past week was we looked at the issue of human sexuality. And I was able to share a number of things, nowhere near exhaustive in a single message there. But I know that you have been, when it comes to this issue of human sexuality, you've been very open and transparent with your story. So I thought some of your story might impact and help our church family. So would you be willing to share some of your experience with human sexuality in the church?
Yeah, absolutely. From the time I was 7, I recognized that I was more attracted to boys than I was to girls. And so pretty much my entire existence, I identified as being homosexual, gay, whatever you want to call it. And certainly came out, particularly after I hit high school. And even though I attended incredibly conservative school in South Carolina when I went to college, I was really coming out as a gay man at that point. And so most of my adult life, I was heavily involved in that I can't say lifestyle because I'm going to get slammed on one side, and so, but that's that's what it was for me. It was more than just a sexual act. But God worked in my life. I had experienced salvation when I was younger, in my teens, and I know that He had saved me. But there was always this double life thing going on, and so when you knew me as youth pastor, we were still trying to keep all of that under wraps. Living a double lifestyle doesn't work. Trust me, it caught up with me, and lost my ministry, and but God's been really gracious, and in the course of that very public outing, God brought really some interesting, cool people, particularly men, into my life who invested in me, mentored me. I have to give a huge shout out to Living Waters Ministries out of Kansas for some counseling and prayer support. And it's been good. And since then, God has been able to use my particular story. I've been able to share at various churches around Lancaster County. So that's a very brief telling of what has gone on in my life. But Brad, do you have any questions about that?
Well, yeah. And again, this is not about pointing fingers or blaming or anything like that.
Right.
But, I was privy to a little bit more of the details.
Very much.
Were going on.
Yeah.
Your experience as someone who identifies as a Christian, who has chosen to follow Jesus, accept His payment for your sins, and also someone who has, and I think you would use the term, struggled with heterosexuality, homosexuality, those issues.
Yeah, it was a losing struggle.
Right.
Yeah.
How was your experience? How did the church interact with you in that? And
I mean, first of all, I need to be totally transparent with this. I was in a key leadership role at the church, and I was caught red-handed coming on to somebody. And so the church responded with church discipline. Get it? Rightly so. However, when that period of restoration was over, I was pretty much told that I couldn't have an active part in the church, which pretty much meant that I'd have to just be a spectator. And I told you earlier, I've always believed that being part of a church family it's not a spectator sport. I need to share my life. I need to, but even with that, there was this period of allowing myself to retrace my steps and allow God to do a life change that needed to be done. However, and I think this is even more telling, during the time when I was going through this restoration period, there were other individuals who maybe were having extramarital affairs and were caught, and they were readily embraced back into the church family. So there was definitely a difference between what was going on in my life and what was going on in other people's lives. What has been really incredibly, almost funny, since I've been speaking and sharing lengthy versions of my stories at different churches, large churches, and in many cases a double service, so that I share my story, and then in between services or at the end, I'm in the lobby greeting, talking to people. And At first, I thought it was just me, and then when it happened time and time again, it was like, okay, well, this is crazy. I would be standing there, and Mrs. Jones would come up and say, "Oh, thank you for sharing. My brother is involved in this, that, and the other thing, blah 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 blah." And in the meantime, Mr. Jones is standing about 10 feet away, just kind of looking. And time after time, women in the church would come up and greet me, and the husbands were, I don't know if they thought homosexuality is contagious. I'm not sure what the deal was, but there was definitely this, and this is in strong Bible teaching churches, but there was definitely a sense of, ooh, we don't want to get too close here. Going back to the experience when I was under a period of restoration, I remember distinctly going to a particular store, and a family from the church, a dad and his son, were coming out, and he grabbed his son by the shoulder and said, "Well, we're getting out of here just in the nick of time." And it was like, yeah, it was a strange time. Obviously, I was broken because of the whole experience, but the response of many from the church family was, I guess we'll say, less than kind. How does that work? In fairness, there were also amazing people that reached out. And I am so thankful for those people. The youth group, the first Sunday after this happened, I knew it was important for me to be visible in the church. I thought it was very important that the kids from the youth group see that I was there, that I was allowing God to work in my life. And I remember, oh my goodness, I remember that first morning like it was yesterday, because I was so hurt by everything. It was like I couldn't breathe. I mean, it was a physical, just get me through this. And going in, and there was a group of the teens that made a point of coming and sitting with me. We'll always be grateful for that. But there was this distinct, you failed, you're done. And there was this idea that there's a hierarchy. This sin is, you can get over this, but not this particular one. And so, yeah.
It's, in our time together this past Sunday as a church family, that's one of the things we talked about. We looked at some of those classic passages that are used to say, well, homosexuality does not line up with God's design and plan. And I would affirm that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But like, for instance, in the 1 Corinthians passage where it says, the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God, and then it starts listing stuff, and it has homosexual offenders down there, depending on the translation.
Right.
The really interesting part is before you get there, there's two things that talk about heterosexual sin.
Yeah.
We skip right over those, but look what it says here. I really think that we've done that. We have created a hierarchy.
Yeah.
And I think it's, on one level, it's destroying our witness to those that we would say, hey, what you're doing, this lifestyle or this identity, or however, again, you would want to phrase it, doesn't line up with God's standard. We want you to know the freedom of living according to God's design. We lose the opportunity to have that conversation when we treat poorly those, like, for instance, in your situation, who are going through this restoration, or we find out things, and then it's almost like you said, it's contagious. Like, oh, I'm going to catch it.
Yeah. And it was so obvious. After about the second time I was at a church, and by that point I'd given it thought, and so I was specifically watching to see what would happen, and it was there. One thing that I do want to mention, Brad, is that when all this went down, and let me back up. When I was growing up, particularly in my early 20s, when I was not involved in a church, when I was very visibly out and proud and doing all the things that now I'm kind of against. Anyhow, the at that point, if I would have been caught with gay friends walking down the streets of Lancaster, I was really in danger of getting beat up. Now that I'm on the opposite side of that, now I'm getting ostracized by the gay crowd, but I'm also kind of getting ostracized still from many in the church that would prefer not to hear about this, or even more telling, some really wonderful church people that I know that have been buying into this fact that that's not really what God has to say about homosexuality. And I get very nervous when I hear from various pulpits that, well, it doesn't really mean this. God doesn't really mean that homosexuality is a sin. And we're going down that path. And I'm thinking, well, now, wait a minute. Isn't that exactly what Satan did in the Garden of Eden, where he said, does God really say that?
Surely you won't die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, God does say that. That's his word. I'm very proud of the fact that my vanity plate on my car is 1 Corinthians 6:11. Such were some of you. I am ecstatic that I can be a spokesman that says, you know what, this was my past. God has saved me. He is bringing me, and this is not past tense. This is an ongoing journey. I would love to sit here with you and talk to all these people that may be listening to this and say, my life is perfect. It ain't. It's an ongoing thing, even at my age. But God's faithful. He's merciful. He's there. I've got to say this because this is very exciting to me. As horrible as all this went down in December 9th, 1999 is when all of this kind of happened. And for a full, a year plus, but the year 2000 was so awful, and yet it was during that time period I have never before or since experienced the presence of God like I did during that year. I mean, he was as real as you are sitting here right now.
Wow.
It was, I could feel, sense his presence. And so many times things would happen. And the verse, I will never leave you or forsake you, was like, bam, right there. God's been good to me, and I don't deserve it. So.
Well, that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
None of us deserve it.
Right.
And yet he gives it so lavishly to us. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know we could talk forever. We probably don't talk too long.
And the both of us together, we could.
Yeah, if you could distill down maybe like one or two sentence, what you would want to say to, our church family, but the church, when it comes to how the church interacts with issues of human sexuality, based on your experience, what would you like us to know? What's a kind of 1-2 sentence summary?
First of all, get rid of any logs. Get rid of those logs, and just reach out in love. And by that, I don't by any means mean lowering standards, but recognizing that all of us are dealing with many different kinds of sins. I don't think we need to call people out specifically, but I do think that we need to be able to reach out in love. That's more than 2 sentences.
All right, so I have to cut you off. No, I think that's very good. We've said it a variety of ways in our context, but we need to care more about the person than the point we're trying to make.
Yes.
I think too often we've been guilty as a church, and not just us, but again, that kind of more corporate global church, we're known for, we're against this, but we're not for the people that Jesus died.
Let me say one more thing. As I've been traveling from church to church and talking about gay issues, the one question that I keep hearing from people is, my brother is, my sister is, how can I help them come out of this? You're not going to. What you can do is continue to show Christ's love to individuals and pray for that person. I am so thankful for a mom and dad that I know they prayed for me every day of my life. And they never came on. They didn't throw me out. They didn't shun me. They treated me with love and respect. And it wasn't like, you shouldn't be doing that. It was more, we love you, we support you. And they lived a consistent testimony in their own right. And as I observed them and saw their love for me, that in turn helped in this whole process. But yeah, you're not going to change. You're not going to change somebody's life. Right. Only Jesus can do that. So,
yeah, I've heard it said, and I know my wife reminds me of this all the time, that I am no one else's Holy Spirit.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So often I try to be, but I have to do what I'm responsible for. Love, sure, speak truth in the context of love, in the context of relationship, for the sake of the gospel of Jesus.
Right.
Not for me to feel like, look what I've accomplished. I got my holy victory here. But it has to be about that person, leading them to the foot of the cross.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, Dennis, again, thank you so much for joining us.
My
This
pleasure.
is great. Thanks for sticking with us. It's a little bit longer of a video, but I think really, really good stuff. If you've got questions, comments, drop them below here. You can do this on whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. And I wouldn't be surprised if we have the opportunity to have another conversation here with Dennis down the road. And maybe if you've got some more questions, we could bring them back and answer some of those.
Would love to do that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thanks for sticking with us, church. We love you, and we're going to see you again real soon.